Good morning, Miltuvet. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing?
Great. How are you?
Not too bad.
On my end, it sounded kind of like you're
Exciting.
underwater, Yogi.
I mean, I could be. Is this better?
Oh my gosh. Technical
Nope. Is it
difficulties.
worse? Oh, great.
Oh, now it's
No,
better.
it's better now.
Oh,
Hey,
perfect.
it's just to take us back to our days that we were in the military and nothing ever worked as advertised.
Yep.
Right? Well, today we have Leah Mooney here with us. Leah,
Here we
would you
go.
like
It's
to
doing it
introduce
again.
yourself? Okay, so what we're going to do?
First of all, I need to get this in a space I can cope with. It's driving me crazy. But yes, my
So,
name is Leah. Um,
yeah.
I am a military brat. I grew up with two parents who were active duty, and I come from a really big military family. I was not able to join myself. So instead, learn about I try to teach people about military culture so that I can help ease the transition for veterans as they go back into civilian society. That's it. I'm in school for social work, and that gives me the tools that I need to push those initiatives for the community that I love so much.
So,
We
Leah,
lost Yogi.
just, oh yeah, it's okay. He'll hop
We
back in
kicked him
here.
out. He'll be back
Yeah,
though.
Booted him.
he was getting too rowdy on there. Hey, Yogi, you can't use that kind of language, man.
Wait, what happened? What happened?
You got booted.
Yeah, I
I
got
got
booted.
booted.
So, Leah, you were saying that you grew up in a military family,
Yes.
and now you're helping service members in the transition.
Mhm.
You're going to school for social work.
Mhm.
So, just paint a picture for us. What was it like um, being a child on a military base, and also being a child with military parents, and
Mhm.
like, what was that like?
Right. So until I spent a fair amount of time out here in the civilian world, I was probably on military bases until I was about 20. Until I think actually more until I went to college, which I was like 19 at the time. I didn't know that it was different. So I have learned that my upbringing, I had a lot more responsibility than my civilian peers. Like I had much higher expectations for like my conduct, my decision making, and more of a responsibility and sense of duty towards others that my normal civilian peers did not have. I recognize that, when you're in the military, when your family's in the military, if you're a kid, you go with them everywhere they go. And so I have lived in Seoul, Korea, where I was the minority. Yeah, like and it just totally shifts your perspective. And you get much more cultural exposure than average civilians. And you just have a much different perspective on the world. And I think overall it made me less reactive than many people my age, because it's like I have a much better view of what is important and what is just small potatoes getting stressed over. You know what I mean? I didn't have like the super strict parents that were, treating me like a troop. I had the ones that were like, make good choices, better, and we're busy. The veteran is behind me, by the way. She's behind the curtain, so she's just like, we're busy. So that was the
So you're keeping your mom in the closet. That is
yeah.
awkward.
She's behind the curtain. She doesn't want to be seen. What'd you say,
I'm
Mom?
seeing some future goals for some people. No,
Yeah, so that's a good point. What she just said. You're gonna get your parents in trouble if you act up. So like
yeah.
my conduct was like, I have to get out of the darkness here. My conduct was much better than my peers because I knew how that would impact my parents. And not my peers on military bases, but you know what I mean, my civilian peers. So you just know how to behave.
You know, one thing that you really just kind of hit on is your parents are like, well, you're a reflection of us.
Right.
And it's something that I've been really diving really into with my own children,
Mhm.
who are, I'm no longer active. Being a retired Navy dad who gets to hang out with a lot more, I get the ability to say, well, you're a reflection of me, but actually we're a team,
Right.
and everything we do as individuals
Mhm.
affects that. How has that environment that you grew up pushed you into getting into helping others? What was it that drove that?
So from a very young age, it was military service is it was both my parents, and then it was grandpa, great grandpa, great great grandpa, like all throughout. So we all the kids have a sense of duty instilled in them. So it's like you from a very young age, we went out and volunteered. Like the second I could make coherent sentences and be useful, I was doing I was doing things in the community that either being voluntold by my grandmother who operated nonprofits focused on education, or just helping out my neighbor. So, oh my gosh, can you please repeat the question? I just totally it just decided
Yeah,
to take a
no,
break.
it's okay. What led you? So was it your result of the environment that you grew up that
Yeah.
pushed you into what you're doing nowadays with social work?
Right. So yes, that is it. It's just been a family tradition to be involved, to be active, and to have that sense of duty that comes from both military service and social service. And in my family, that social service is more activism. So versus like politics, it's activism. So I I use that those skills that I learned from my military family members and my ancestors to kind of be a pain in the butt of people who are, not doing what they should be doing. So you said, yep, she is military. Yeah, so it's where a lot of my civilian peers will give up, I will become more determined to face the challenges I face when advocating for specifically the veteran community.
So it sounds like you have that mission oriented, mentality,
Mhm.
which I can also relate to coming from a service family myself, not serving, but serving the community and like
Yes.
the veterans and just the bigger community.
Mhm.
Um, just where I live, right? And in California, specifically Orange County or Southern California. Um, I guess, can you please differentiate between like politics and activism? Because I think a lot of people get them mixed up. So
So
you can please, just in your own words, like how you feel, like what's the difference between those? Because again, most people think it's the same thing.
right. So activism, the simplest way for me to put that is politics is staying within the lines and within specific guidelines, whereas activism is being disruptive. So you are putting information or issues at the forefront of people's minds by raising awareness. So you can do this through like protests, right? So my grandparents were a great grandmother was a suffragette. You can do this through protests, or you can be someone who just speaks out in a bad situation. So, for example, was it the Civil War that the guy got arrested, Mom? Yeah. Okay. Draft riot. So a draft riot. Okay. So, well, I don't know. He didn't really start a riot. The rich people should go too. Right. We go and you need to go. Okay, so here we go. So, oh yeah, my mom will yell. You'll hear her if you just. She will use her command voice if she has something she
Some
wants to
people
say.
have Chat GPT. You have your mom in a closet. I like
Yes,
it.
that's exactly right. So, and that's why I'm like, listen, you guys don't. When I tried to like enter into the veteran like nonprofit space where these people who didn't have much experience with veterans and they're like trying to preach to me about how veterans are, I'm like, you have a textbook, I have two behind me being irritating all the time. So but okay, so there was a ancestor of ours, we all served in the military. They all served in the military. He was arrested he was a service member because he stood on a stump and started saying, "Why aren't the rich guys being drafted too?" So that's just one sentence, and it is disruptive, and it shakes up the whole atmosphere, and they ended up getting arrested because they said he was inciting a riot. He wasn't. He just stood up and made a point, and it made people. So politics, I tend to like to stay out of, just because there is a lot of smoke and mirrors, whereas activism is a lot more raw, and I'm just a very blunt, honest person. So yeah, I'm going to look that up. What's activism? The definition versus politics. You can be an activist in a political space.
Yeah, well, a lot of what you're doing is advocacy work,
Right.
right? Because you're advocating for the veteran community,
Right.
issues that matter, bringing it to the forefront. And advocacy and education is also very similar. Some people don't like the word advocacy because they associate maybe with activism or like that disruption, right? So
Yeah.
especially like within the military and others like structured, right?
Mhm.
People tend to get like,
Yep.
I don't like that word because it means that you're breaking out of that structure that you're so used to, those
Right.
the rules.
Mhm.
I think how you explained it, Leah, was perfect.
Thank you.
Disrupting.
Mhm.
When you're being an advocate or activist, you are disrupting. And one thing that I can speak from my own personal experience and from some brothers and sisters that I served with, typically we're all about the team. We're all about helping each other out, getting the mission done. And then when it comes to transition, we got to break away from the team
Mhm.
because after we cross that date, we no longer have that team, and the team has to keep going. It has to keep going, doing its mission. We want it to do its mission. We want it to continue, and that's why we train our reliefs. That's why we do turnovers,
Mhm.
pass downs. We continue. The mission will continue, but you got to advocate from yourself, and you got to break from that group and say, "Hey, I need to take care of X, Y, and Z before I
Mhm.
get out." And it's disrupting your normal path. And
Yep.
that's why it's so hard for military members when they're transitioning to start advocating for themselves.
Right. And I found myself in several spaces where, because there's also something I've observed, feel free to correct me, mostly people that were like junior enlisted, they are the people that are like higher up the totem pole tend to be a little bit more outspoken. But there is as you've seen, there is a kind of tendency for people who have recently left the military or who are like really impacted by the military culture to not question people who are doing certain things for them. So like there's almost like this kind of what's the word? Assumption that everyone who's doing something is trained and knows what they're doing. Instead of it's like, oh well, he's the doctor, or she's the therapist. Instead of being like, nope, that's weird. What you just said was not true. So I have several times stepped in and be like, you guys need to like speak up for yourselves and say, hey, that's not how you operate. That's not how you think. You're talking based on assumptions, stuff like that. It's really little things you can do to advocate for yourself, but it's about pushing back against the things that do you harm or your community harm.
I would also say it's something simple as just asking a question,
Right.
right? You don't understand what they're talking about. Instead of holding it up and saying, hey, I'll ask later or I'll go afterwards and I'm embarrassed because I don't know what this question is. I'll go ask Chat GPT because it knows better about my life, right? Instead of just asking the person that's right in front of you and saying, hey, doc, I don't understand what you're talking about, or insert any kind of figure of authority there and
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Please explain it to me. Maybe it makes me feel dumb, or maybe it makes me feel like you're looking at me like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as smart as I expected to be.
Mm-hmm.
But who cares? My
Right.
question is being answered. And maybe sometimes And I have found this myself, that whenever you ask those questions, it is the voice for somebody else that says, hey, maybe this question wasn't dumb. Maybe
Mhm.
I can, and I should be asking my own questions.
Right. And there are it's this kind of questioning authority thing is not typical in many of these more structured spaces. So it's kind of trying to break that mindset of like, I can't ask why. Yes, you can, and you should. Now that you are free of the chain of command, you have to ask the questions that about different services you receive, or about different initiatives that are happening. And um, another really good way to advocate for yourself or your community is learning how to tactfully correct someone that is spreading incorrect information. And I've had to do this in the academic space, because there are a lot of assumptions about veterans, or military personnel. One that drives me absolutely insane is I remember a specific event where a veteran got kind of frustrated and a little intense, which I'm very used to. And when he left, the person who was teaching me, was like, you got, sorry, you got to be patient with them because of PTSD. And I'm just like, there's no indication that this man has PTSD. For all you know, he worked at a desk the whole time and never went anywhere, or never had anything bad happen to him. And so I gently explained, I'm like, if I may, offer a perspective as someone who's grown up around service members. And they're like, yeah, okay, what do you think it is? I'm like, well, a lot of people in the military are very used to people being efficient and trained in the positions that they hold. And that kind of frustration usually comes when someone's not performing to the standard that they expect. So, in small words, I just said, you're incompetent and it's bothering them. But I said it in a very nice way. But it's really hard because it's trying to translate between a very harsh, direct community to a very gentle, you know community, and it's rough.
I can tell you, because I started college 5 weeks ago, my experience in college has actually been phenomenal. I love it.
Yes.
I like learning. But I have noticed some of my instructors, not all of them, but some of them have a gentler path.
Hmm.
And I hear the snickering of the students whenever they're doing the gentler path.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, just get to the point, man. Tell them to shut
Hmm.
up and listen.
Right. Because that's why, like, I don't people like I am used to hearing, you're wrong, like, you're wrong, you're incorrect. Not, well, maybe we could try to look at this a different way, like, or like my mom or dad saying, like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, just totally blunt, totally. And then of course I'll argue back. Like, I'm just as combative. And
I mean, and there's nothing wrong with, and I'm going to say this for the record, there's nothing wrong with having a gentler way of doing
no.
things. It's just we're fast paced, full speed, you know, like kind of like watching a rodeo.
Hmm.
8 seconds. You don't have time to be nice to the bull. You got to get on there and just ride it and try to
Right.
hit the 8 second mark.
Max efficiency always. That is
Well,
what I.
I would just say in education in general, like the culture as an educator, right, is to not. I mean, it used to be like, I remember, like, they would actually correct you. No, you're wrong. Now it's like it's not normal to say you're wrong. You have to say, well, that might be your opinion or how you view it, but that's not
Hmm.
actually the way it is.
Right.
So they kind of circumvent, right? They're going around it rather than just addressing it directly.
Hmm.
And I think that, it does foster a healthier environment for people to share their opinions,
Hmm.
right? But I think it also does create some confusion, like within the classroom, if you're not, there's a nice way of saying no, right? I
Right.
appreciate you sharing your perspective, but actually it's this,
Right.
right? So it's being stronger, right,
Hmm.
in the way in which you're saying it and
Right.
correcting the individual.
You know,
And
go
it's
go ahead, Leo.
it's it's a really and I will just say that it's a very difficult. Most people who have a military parent have one military parent. I did not learn the civilian way of talking to people or interacting with people at all. So it is a very difficult skill to learn, but you can learn it. And as long as you take, as long as you go out of your way to make sure that you learn like new skills, like active listening, conflict resolution, just all different kinds of things. It's not like settle it in the tree line conflict resolution. It's, you know, literally having to talk it out. And it's a very difficult thing to learn, but it is possible. So,
And I think it's part of the whole reprogramming yourself, right? Being
mhm.
able to be, as they call, I recently learned is the whole code switch, right?
Yes.
Speaking to the audience that you're intending to, right? If I started speaking right now Spanish,
Hmm.
how much of any of this conversation with any one of us really fully understand and or have a meaningful impact? It would
Right.
be like I'm just talking some words like tacos, everybody understands because they're delicious, right?
Bro, you say
Uh
cerveza, I'm gonna know what you're talking about, man. You're talking about a beer.
right.
And
But
tacos? Okay, let's go.
some words will come in, they'll come through, but you won't be able to fully grasp the thing, or you're wasting too much energy trying to stay engaged, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're able to have the same language, the same lingo, or at least be empathetic and slow enough to have that conversation, then it creates a different dynamic, and people are more receptive to both advocate for themselves,
Right.
receive the information, and to an extent not feel like you're being talked down to, instead you're
Right.
being talked to, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we sometimes fall into, not being able to have that diversity of different vocabulary or different life experiences to be able to
Hmm.
have and reach multiple audiences.
Right. And I think that a lot of veterans get into a kind of anxiety loop where they think that they have to totally conform to the behaviors of the civilian world, where like but you can still maintain your assertive and direct communication style. You just have to do like adjust a couple things. And the truth is, when you are assertive, even if it is respectfully assertive, you may get negative feedback because people will, especially people who are either not used to being challenged or are very sensitive to any kind of correction, will always be that way. So it's not necessarily your delivery. Not always be that way, but you know what I mean. So it's not necessarily your delivery all the time. Sometimes it's just the person. So you do your best to adjust, but you don't have to stop being direct and just tactfully direct.
Something that Yogi talked about speaking different languages. Also, military members speak different languages,
Hmm.
and we need to be mindful of that when we are in an environment that nobody else speaks our language. And if you speak, let's say, Yogi gave the example of if he were to speak Spanish. um, I mean, there's different variations of Spanish, right? If you go from Mexico to Spain and you speak Spanish, they're gonna talk different from Puerto Rico and from Costa Rica, right? They all got their own different dialects. And if you were to do that and you're trying to communicate what it's like to not understand what other people are feeling, then that would actually convey a message of I know how other people feel when I can't speak their languages.
Hmm.
The same thing is with military. It's a different dialect of English.
Hmm.
It's where you get a bunch of different cultures that are a warrior mindset. It's different between the Army, Air Force, Navy. It's all the different branches has their own different talks. And then there's even dialects from there, where you got like submariners don't talk the same as surface ship people, don't talk the same as the SEALs. They don't talk the same as aviation, and that's the thing. Like we all have different languages, and if you're trying to convey a message to somebody, and you don't know how to get them to understand, that could be incredibly frustrating. And so back to your point where the instructor's like, oh, he's dealing with PTSD. No, he's dealing with trying to figure out how to convey how he feels, because he used to be able to say it this way, and then everybody else had an understanding because he spoke the same language. What's your take on military members, transitioning? Like, what is like your biggest tip for them for when they start their transition?
Okay, yeah. So first, to what you just said, that frustration that you feel when you are trying to convey something in a different language or different dialect, that term is called acculturative stress. So if you want to look it up, anybody watching, if they want to look it up, look up the term acculturative stress, points of acculturative stress and what it means. They're going to use immigrants as an example, but it applies to military members the same way, because the military is not a job, it's entirely different society. So if that is where that frustration comes from, that acculturative stress. Now for transition, my best bit of advice is stay connected. So you might not be able to stay connected with your team. You might not be able to stay connected with, the people that you worked with, but it's really important to have some kind of civilian connection with military prior service members, so veterans, or the military community in general, because the social support that you can give each other as service members who understand, the frustrations and understand the culture that you came from, it makes it much more, it makes the social support that you get a lot more effective. So a lot of people, I see this with like spouses, right? So there's a lot of frustration in spouses where it's like, okay, I don't understand. Like, I'm being supportive, I'm doing my best. I don't understand why my service member is depressed, why my veteran is agitated. And there are some things that you're just not going to get unless you've actually experienced a similar thing. So making sure that you have those ties is it's peer-to-peer support is the term that's used. So peer-to-peer support is very effective. So it's like, yes, you still need the support from your family, you still need the support from your children, but you also need the support from peers who understand what you're going through. So it's just like, okay, I always use this example because it's very clear. It's the same reason that Alcoholics Anonymous is so effective, because you are with other people who are struggling with the same problem with alcoholism, versus just a bunch of random people who have never picked up a drink before and are, dealing with depression. You're not going to have the same experience. So that is why peer to peer is so helpful. And in this case, it's veterans. Sometimes you need to narrow the group more, depending on if I don't recommend narrowing it too far, because some people are like, specifically you can only be with, infantrymen. I would say that sometimes you can narrow it. It's important to narrow it further to like people who have similar experiences with the military. So like combat MOS versus, you know, uh, people who have dealt with military sexual trauma, or people who have, uh, who aren't in any combat MOS, who are in support MOS. And the reason why that's important is because in these groups, so let's say you're in a group, sorry, you're in a group of mostly combat people, and you're the only one who like had a desk job. You are going to feel like talking about any of your problems is going to make you look like, it's going to seem like such small potatoes to the stuff that they're talking about. You're not going to talk about your issues. And then on the flip side, the people who are involved in the group, while some may be understanding, others will be like, dude, like, your problems are tiny. So it's best to be around people who have a similar kind of, experience in that way.
Shared experiences is kind
Yes,
of
shared experience. Thank you.
Yeah. No, and I found that in a lot of the work that I've done, like within the community, whether it's veterans, whether it's justice involved youth or justice involved veterans, right? And then there might be different things that happened to them, which led them down that path. And so, by like what you're saying, grouping them more closely by shared experiences, they're able to help support one another, understand where they're coming from. And as long as it's in a setting in which there's a trained professional to help give them tools to also work on those things that they're experiencing, that they're trying to work through. Because you could talk all day long, but if you're not given tools to actually help you in those situations, help you overcome that, like
Right.
it's not useful, right? So that's why some people don't end up staying in like a support group, because they don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. They don't feel like they're
Right.
getting better, right? But better is a very relative term. So it's like, well, how are you measuring getting better? Right? Are you taking 3 steps forward, 1 step back? And then another 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back. Well, you're still
Right.
making progress. And so being able to be in a group of people that say, hey, but remember like 3 months ago, you couldn't even be in that type of environment.
Right.
Now
Someone
you
to
can,
measure your,
yeah. So let's measure your success. Like, let's make sure that we're validating or praising the success and how you've come so far. So I think that my experience within the veteran community is they're very hard on themselves, and they're not
yes.
recognizing that, hey, you've like, look at all the things you accomplished, right?
Right.
And even post transition, right? As you've transitioned out of the military, you're going to school, you're doing all these things, and yes, it feels weird, but
Right.
doing the right thing, right? And just continue doing what you're doing. So I mean, like, if anything, as a non-veteran but military connected individual, my biggest thing is, hey, like, let's recognize what you've accomplished so far. Let's
Right.
recognize that what you're doing is scary,
Right.
and let's continue to create a plan and put people around you that'll help support you in the goals in which you want to achieve. If you're not sure what goals you want to achieve, like if you want something like super concrete, super detailed, let's go down this path of, let's educate you on what you're interested in. Let's look at what is your MOS and how can we translate it into the civilian world, and
Right.
what you're passionate about. Let's explore that pathway for you.
Right. So you just hit on 3 big points that, if it's okay, I'd like to talk off of. Okay. Transition jobs. Okay. So the first thing you said that hit was justice involvement. So that is a perfect example of a group that should be separate from a bigger group, because there's a whole unique set of anxieties that come with being justice involved, specifically for veterans. So it's failing the wider collective. So like failing brothers and sisters in arms because you have done something dishonorable, or whatever is going on as that far as that conflict is concerned. And then there is people who have been justice involved. It is very difficult to explain that experience to people who have not. And it also comes with a more kind of, I think primal is like a weird word to use, but it's like survival mode in a different way that is very difficult to, again, translate to someone who has not had and you might engage in behavior while being justice involved, so incarcerated, that you're not necessarily proud of, that's not normal for the average person. So being able to just let down your armor and talk openly and without having to worry about discomfort in the listener is a big bonus for any kind of peer-to-peer group. And then the next thing you said was that veterans are very hard on themselves, and that is a perfect observation, because celebrating small successes is not like a super common thing in from my experience with service members. So it's more like, you did your job. Like, okay, you did your job. But you have to celebrate those small wins, those small personal wins, or you just feel like you're not getting anywhere. And one thing that I like to do when I'm talking to like veteran friends and stuff is be like, dude, think about the stuff you've already overcame to become a troop. Like, just to get through boot camp, you've already experienced much more hardship than the average person does. And if you can overcome that, you can certainly overcome a transition to the civilian world. Something that is logically easier. And then you said talking about transitioning to MOS transitions, job transitions. For that, I think it's also really helpful to let the service members know that the things that they have learned, communication skills, leadership skills, those are all valuable regardless of your MOS. You will still have those skills and they can still be beneficial even if you want to change your job. So just kind of like helping them identify the skills that are beneficial in the civilian world. That's it. That's all I got.
So one thing to kind of touch on a little bit more on justice involved veterans is in Orange County, we have our own, they call it the Humvee unit. And there's a lot of other, whether I know state, I'm not quite sure on like federal facilities that have veteran specific mods is kind of typically what they call them. And what I've seen, because I have clearance to go into different correctional facilities and facilitate trainings inside, the veterans are always conducting themselves in a very, professional way, and
Yes.
being able to help encourage them to have that sense of community within that mod. I've seen like when someone gets transferred in, like it takes a little minute for everyone to get, acclimated, but they they're there to support one another. I think it's such like a great thing to have more support for justice involved veterans, because there are a lot of different things that led them to be justice involved.
Right.
And that's why veteran courts are very important too, because they're able to help address the different, maybe like coexisting, or not coexisting, different challenges that they might have, and helping them navigate, and not just them, but also their families, because they may have a spouse or dependents, like children, that may need additional help while they're going to be incarcerated.
Right.
And so being able to connect them with those organizations. And in Orange County, we have a pilot program where we have the family court with veterans, also being able to connect them with resources. So we've done a really good job of trying to bridge that gap and take what seemed taboo, right, and actually support and see success.
Right.
And back in November, we had Ted Fuentes on the podcast Alive. And, he's doing great work with some of these justice involved veterans and their families, and using equine therapy. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And this was not just a connection made from the work that I do with the Orange County Veterans and Military Families Collaborative, but also with the court pilot, and connecting them with Strong Families, Strong Children. And so it's just, the beautiful thing is when we collaborate and when we support one another.
Right.
We're able to help break some trauma, whether it's little t or big T.
Right. Little t or big T trauma. Yeah.
Because it transfers. That trauma transfers, especially to the children. So it's like you have to also learn how to help support them while supporting yourself, and you can't do that alone.
Right. And I wonder, I'm kind of curious, like, to the two guys here, are you guys, what do you think is some of the biggest mental hurdles that veterans might jump through when they get justice involved? Like, what do you think some of the thoughts are? If you were to be justice involved suddenly, what would you think?
Yogi, let's go with your reaction because you just got out.
I'm gonna say, how dare you assume my sex? We are in 2025. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I think one of the biggest hurdles is being able to take a minute to think about. Okay, let me backtrack. One of my biggest mentors, his name is Maurice Wilson. He says, "We are the 1% that the other 99% forgot about because they learned to live without us." Right.
Right.
And so with that, we're not able to be on the same page in the terms of communication and understanding, right? Um, so it's frustrating to be able to have conversations with young adults, people of young or age or demographic that should be similar to us, but they have no idea about a lot of the things that we go through, right? So to them, it's unbelievable the things that we face, and it's
Right.
completely unrelatable. So with that, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles. Being able to have that open mind to not only mentally accepted but emotionally accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in the military, we have this, whether we like it or not, we have this sense of we're gonna help each other make the mission no matter what, whether you want
Right.
to or not.
Mm-hmm.
You are part of the mission, you're part of the team, you are going to make it with the rest of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the civilian side, it's more of the, well, if you're here today, cool. If you're not here today or tomorrow, I don't care. I gotta get paid. I gotta pay my bills. I gotta worry about everything that I have going on, and you're not a priority in my life.
Mm-hmm.
First me, second me, then maybe religion, and then afterwards maybe family, but then me again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the mindsets that really we struggle with, because we don't have that. We have this community that we're all suffering through the same stuff, and we're having the same stressors, and we have a massive group of, whether we want to or not, that we're working together the problem.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you feel like it is difficult because it's so individualistic here in the
Correct.
civilian space, and you're so used to having that support of your buddies in the service, and so is that about right?
For the most part, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you want to bring some of that camaraderie, some of that help and that support, the civilian counterparts, they're like, how dare you? Are you being
Right.
selfish? And you're like, I'm being selfish by giving my time to help thousands of people get something moving forward that doesn't really affect me anymore, because by the time it's done and passed, it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be, I'm not going to be anywhere in the picture. So I'm just suffering to help somebody else, but I'm the
Right.
selfish one.
Right.
Tell me how that makes sense.
It doesn't. Another thing that just made me laugh thinking back was when she said mission focused. Like the word mission means an entirely different thing to to civilians. I remember when, and then again, even though I'm a brat, like I have a little bit higher level of mission focus than my civilian counterparts, and it's just like, no, you don't understand. Mission is an obsession in the military community. So yeah, camaraderie, friendship is very different definitions for military personnel.
And I like one more thing that you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
Buzzwords. Right now, they're so cool to be on a mission. Let's go on a mission together.
You are not
Let's
on a mission. You are not.
Exactly, right. Let's talk about teamwork. Let's do what the Navy SEALs do.
Oh
Let's do
no.
what the all these people do. It's like, you have no idea, just because you read it in a book somewhere, or you read it in an audiobook or in a podcast. you have no idea what it really truly means.
Right. It's just, yeah, it's because I remember like my first, because when my family operated nonprofits, they operated it with the mindset of the military community, where it's like mission is everything. Like we make sure everything we do is supporting our mission, is getting is going towards the completion of the mission. Well, the first time I joined a nonprofit that was not operated by people who have that mindset, I was very disturbed because it seemed like, okay, we have this mission statement plastered on our wall, and then nobody cares about it, and then that created a lot of tension and anxiety because we do not have the same definition for those. We don't have the same level of commitment, and it is it's very difficult to deal with. I can relate to that somewhat.
You know, the military pretty much it gave me an opportunity that I would have never had if
Mhm.
I never joined. I statistically I should not be where I'm at today, and where I'm at today is a totally different place because of the men and women in the military that helped me grow
Mhm.
into the man I am today. And the things that you accomplish while you're in the military, it's just like incredible. The things
Mhm.
that we do, we get a massive in the Navy when we get an aircraft carrier going, we're getting 5,000 people to all row in the same direction
So cool.
to accomplish a single focus item. Yeah, everybody's got their own responsibilities, but we're all focused on getting to the end result, which there's always an end result,
Mhm.
whether it's what we intended or something else popped up and we took care of that. But we all work together. You would go to the chow hall and everybody would know why we're there for the most
Mhm.
part. When you get out, you've tied your identity to that uniform that you wore,
Mhm.
to the person standing to your left and right.
Mhm.
You're really fully integrated. And when you get pulled out of that, you start to slow down because the
Mhm.
military doesn't matter if you sit behind a desk or if you're up on the flight deck or if you're in a platoon or a squad. It doesn't matter where you're at. There, it's fast paced, and when you get pulled out of that, you start to slow down. And what
Mhm.
happens? You have that thing that you didn't really have before, and that was time.
Mhm.
And your body starts to tell you things that you weren't really listening to because you were too busy focused on the people around you
Right.
and with that single mindset. And now your body's telling you, well, hey, my knees hurt, my back hurts. You keep reliving some of the things that you wish that you didn't have to live. Um, that could be PTSD,
Mhm.
or it could be, you know, a matter of like, well, man, I really wish I would have done everything. And I tell people all the time, you got to just live in the moment when you're there
Mhm.
and try to capture and hold on to those because when you're out, that's it. You don't get a redo of that time.
Right.
And thankfully, I'm really proud of the time that I had. And the military literally gave me an opportunity to be where I'm at today.
Mhm.
So my mindset is honestly just trying to figure out how to live in where I'm at right now and not worry about everything else. Because that's one thing that we're really good at. We are planners. We are let's go get it done. We've had like 15 meetings on this. Let's just execute.
Right.
Um, it's just learning how to do that. And I'm only a year and a half out,
Mhm.
and it went by like that.
But you can still, and this is another bit of quote unquote advice I would give to transitioning members. You don't have to slow down. What you can do is you can, of course, take time to assess injuries, different internal and external wounds, and figure out how to focus on healing those internal and external wounds. But you can also use all of this, driven energy and your ability to plan, your ability to execute missions to inspire civilians to take action in areas where they want to see change. So that is why I'm like, I think that a lot of veterans need to get involved in like social work. And it doesn't seem to align to anyone, like if you look at it just on face value. But if you look at the things veterans care about, stuff like homelessness, stuff like you know, um, hunger insecurity or food insecurity, stuff like poor infrastructure, all of that stuff is within. You guys could just fix the world if you would get together. And then, because it takes, I made a joke once, I was like, one veteran is worth like 6 civilians, not because like you civilians are worthless, but because they have that drive they have that drive and they have that
There's a
training.
soundbite.
Huh?
I said, there's a soundbite.
Don't do that. But it's like they have all this training and they have the camaraderie and speak that common language. Oh my gosh, I will never forget this day. I was in charge of a volunteer group of veterans, and this was how this conversation went. I didn't know what I was doing. They were like, okay, my boss goes, okay, you're gonna lead this group of veterans, and we want you to have them organize the clothing pantry. I was like, okay. And they had like a specific method for organizing the clothing pantry. My coworker, who was a veteran, and he wasn't there, so it was my job. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, how many volunteers do I have? They're like 6, and a group of 6 veterans. And I said, how long do I have? She said, well, 4 hours. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the time? And she looked at me funny, like she didn't understand what I meant. And I kind of realized that she doesn't understand that veterans are much more efficient because they can work together and they speak a similar language. So when I had the volunteer group go down there, I went, they were all sitting there and I said, listen, guys, I don't know what he does in here. I have no idea what's going on. You guys are going to have to figure it out. And then they immediately started like looking at the clothes. They're like, okay, I see the method he's using here. And they all figured it out. And it was done within like an hour and a half. So that efficiency is something that civilians are not trained to do. They don't know how to do that and they don't know how to work together the same way. So if you guys get involved in social initiatives, you will very quickly change the world. And that is a new sense of purpose that you can have, a new mission. So you're not feeling so, downtrodden. And instead of kind of getting frustrated with civilians, which is very easy to do, inspire them. Use the things that you've learned to kind of tell them like, okay, in the military, how do you get people? How do you get thousands of people that have very different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, different political beliefs, and all sorts of diverse experiences to work together? Teach them that. And they will, because they need to learn how to put differences aside to focus on the mission. And I think you guys can really set a good example for them by doing that and teaching them about that. And you could be really great community leaders. So it's a whole new sense of purpose.
I really like
Sorry, I
that.
was trying to find the
because-
mute button,
Me
unmute button.
too.
Everyone's like, just
That's what I figured you were doing. I'm like, I could say something, but I'll wait.
Yes.
So just my experience, Leah. So I mean, especially because I'm in this space, for supporting veterans, I would say 90% of those that I work with within the community are veterans themselves, and they're able to get so many more things done because they're able to understand exactly how to reach the veteran themselves, how to connect to the veteran themselves, and then they find that passion, right? And then they're able to to use that drive and put it towards something that they're passionate about, and
Right.
help a community that resonates with them, that they're a part of. Some of the veterans that I know that maybe didn't initially, once they got into this work, they went to school and they were like, hey, I'm going to be like an architect or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, I did that for a while, and maybe they lost their job, or they just kind of weren't happy. So then they left. And then they started being a part of some of these veteran support groups. And
Mhm.
then like through that education, right? Or maybe they never even left those positions, and they just found like that community, that purpose. And then they
Mhm.
end up entering in the space, I feel like, at some point, right? So yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying. I think that a lot of veterans would find a lot of purpose
Mhm.
by supporting other veterans. They may not like the continued bureaucracy that they have to
Mhm.
deal with, but they know how to navigate that, right?
Right.
And be able to support how to actually speak to the veteran too when they begin to get frustrated. It's like, I'm here to navigate, right? That's
Right.
what the VSO is here to do. They're there to navigate that,
Right.
challenges that they're having.
And I, as you just said, helping navigate. The reason that I advocate for it, so what I see a lot is that veterans will go into the corporate world, be absolutely miserable, leave the corporate world, and then start doing like they go to work, they hate their life, they're like, this is miserable, we're doing nothing. It's about money. It's everything that is the antithesis, the total opposite of what you learn in the military. And then they decide, okay, we're going to get into this kind of humanitarian type work, and we can just cut out the whole corporate misery and just start encouraging veterans to get involved in these social initiatives. And again, this is part of the activism disruptor thing. I don't like many civilian nonprofits because they aren't efficient with money. Well, veterans are. And if you care about solving the issue, like once they learn, they will be efficient with the money. If you are passionate about solving the issue, and it's not like there's no money in the cure, there's only money in the treatment attitude, then veterans can solve some really, really big social problems we have. And I would love seeing that. I would absolutely love seeing that. And specifically, if they could get groups that specifically they can get groups that are mostly inhabited by veterans, so like classrooms that are mostly with veterans with each other, instead of having to deal with okay, people who are just don't understand the military and have like a bunch of biases and negative thoughts about the military that might be in college. Hopefully that's coming across properly. If you could get a group of people who are veterans focused on that, it would be a more welcoming environment to them, and probably a lot more productive and appealing. Because yeah, I see a lot of veterans try to go into like business, but it's business with a humanitarian aim, where you can actually just do that without having to start a whole business. And I would like them to know how to do that. And you learn how to do that through like social work, human services. To put it in the words of my great great grandfather, all those hippies don't need to be there. You can, you can have fellow service members alongside you that get it.
Yeah, the colleges nowadays, we're very lucky as veterans in today's world. We have more resources than there ever was, and colleges, for the most part, not all of them, but most of the ones worth their weight have a VRC, which is a Veterans Resource Center.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go to your class, and then you could go download at the VRC and hang out with other veterans that are like-minded, even though we have different opinions, like you said. And that's what I love about us. Like you said, hey, we come from all different walks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yogi, born in Mexico City,
Mm-hmm.
me, I was just I'd probably be considered a hillbilly. Yogi
Mm-hmm.
and me are the best friends. Like we don't see everything the same, but we would literally stop and do whatever it took for each other. And it's the same like that for all my brothers and sisters that I served with. we don't agree. We
Mhm.
don't agree on a lot of things, but we do agree that we have each other's back when it actually counts.
Hmm.
I'm gonna tell you
And
something
yeah,
that he brought up to mind, right? And I say it jokingly all the time, but I mean it because I realized a long time ago that there's so many things that people are can find against, right?
Hmm.
But if you jokingly say, "Hey, let's go eat a taco," right? They'll tell you what kind of taco, from where, Texas, Mexico, California, and then you'll start arguing, right? And people will argue, well, Taco Bells are the best tacos, right? And then everybody will say, that's not even a taco, right? But
Jack in the Box tacos, okay?
but the point is that everybody appreciates and has a conversation about that, right?
Hmm.
Now, if we could just focus on our similarities, Abraham Lincoln had a good philosophy, and he said, "I don't like this person. That means I don't know them well enough. Let me take a minute and go get to know them, right?
Right.
And then find some similarities that allow us to have a conversation." And recently, right here in college, I see a lot of students, right, with a
Hmm.
younger mindset, and they say some really off the wall stuff, and that quote specifically comes to mind, and I'm like, you know what? I don't like what this person is saying, but let me take a step back. Let me go get to know them so that I can actually have a conversation, right? And it turns out that every time that I actually allow myself that opportunity, man, those people just end up having a great conversation. They love having me, and then they want to become best friends. And I'm just like, oh, slow down, slow your horses. We're not at that level. But it
Working
just
that
creates
yogi charm.
Like, hold on a minute.
Yes, you have that charm, Yogi. But I would also say that what I'm hearing you say is being curious about where someone's coming from. And so I
Yeah.
think that when we look at the iceberg model, we only see what's on the surface, right?
Right.
We don't see what's underneath. So when we're curious about when someone says something off the wall, which I do all the time,
Right.
where is that coming from?
Right.
Right? To be like, instead of like kind of attacking that person back, right? By like, it's just like, like, why do you say that? Like, where's that coming
Yes.
from? And just having that open mind
Mhm.
to trying to understand rather than try to force them into thinking the way that you think, because that's not always the right thing. And maybe what you thought, wasn't actually the full picture, right? And this
Mhm.
person's giving you another perspective. And then you're able to have a better picture of what is happening.
Right. And I fully agree with that. And especially in, like, hypothetically speaking, let's say we were in a really emotionally charged political environment, if that were ever to happen, the best way to deal with people with opposing viewpoints is not to force things down their throat. It's to ask questions and figure out why they think the way they do. And once you do that, first of all, it diffuses the situation completely if you don't do it in an antagonistic way. And then on the individual level to that person, it kind of makes them think and makes them self reflect. And then a lot of the times, if you will do that questioning, and if something they're thinking is really ignorant, they tend to kind of deprogram themselves. If you just ask questions and you are curious and you not like challenging it, you just ask and make them say it. There are plenty of beliefs that I have had in my lifetime that when I start to really think about it because someone asks me a question, I realize that it was a very, very I can say it about myself, dumb belief. So I can easily deconstruct my own biased thinking if someone just asks questions.
I would like to say with a caveat: if you're a service member to another service member or a family member, you know, that knows the lingo, right? For example, the first time that I will do it to when I meet a Marine is like, "What is your favorite color?" Okay, or, "What crayon do you like to eat?"
Yes.
Or talk crap to the army or the Coast Guard, the puddle jumpers, whatever it is. But
The
that
culture first.
that breaks the ice, and we know that about us, right?
Right.
but it's just knowing that demographic and being able to share that unique bond to say, hey, I belong here, you belong here, let's talk shit real quick so that we
Hmm.
can move on, break whatever iceberg that that we might have, whatever barriers in front of us, and create this bond so that we can accomplish whatever is going to be coming up next.
And I think that's something the military community does really well. And it's walk towards discomfort instead of, avoiding it. So even that, like, just kind of like talking crap, like a lot of the times people in the civilian world, they don't even want to crack jokes. Like they don't understand that it makes it a lot easier if you're able to kind of immerse in discomfort. Like, I don't know how to explain it without, I don't know what the rules are on this podcast, but yeah,
No, no,
so
no, you're good, you're good. But with
We
that,
we break the
uh,
rules all the time. And so
exactly.
one of the things that I want to make sure that we get is, Leah, what is one of the biggest lessons that you would like to leave everybody with before we conclude this episode?
I would say if you are a veteran that's transitioning into the civilian world, you're going to be very frustrated with civilians. That's just going to happen. But I ask that you try to extend the same understanding that you do to your fellow service members, to civilians, and the kind of empathy and patience, and kind of consider how your experience has shaped your perspective. So, one of my friends was recently talking to me, and he's like, well, anytime I talk to someone and they complain about something small, it drives me crazy. It makes me really agitated because, I've been to war and I've seen really awful things. And I say, okay, well, try to consider what you were like before you ever went to war. So, like, reflect back on there was a time when little things annoyed you too. So, there you go. It kind of opens up that thought process of, all right, maybe they're not just a bunch of big whiny babies. They just have a different perspective than me. So just go through that thought process.
Yogi, you're muted.
I was testing y'all to see if you were paying attention. Now that we're moving forward with that, Leah, I want to thank you for coming here and sharing your perspectives with us. I know you are a huge, as we already established, a huge activist in social media, and you want the best for us, right? You're not attacking us. You're not, just talking crap to talk crap. You are coming from the lens of changing the mindset, changing the atmosphere and the areas that we're in order to for us to be able to be successful, self advocate, and move forward. I mean, with your family, your history, and your mom that you have, hiding in the closet, you guys make an awesome team, and we're really thankful. And hopefully, one day. I get to meet your mom versus just, a voice in the background that may or may not exist.
Just making it up. Yeah, she's here for an extended visit. So I could easily get her to talk, but be on camera, she absolutely will not do that. So I would have to sit her like across from me where you can't see, and she'd be happy to talk.
We can arrange that.
Yep,
That'd be awesome.
perfect. Sounds great.
Yeah, Leah, thank you so much for coming on here and taking the time to hang out with us. Really been looking forward to it. You guys can find Leah all over um, TikTok, LinkedIn. She's very active and posting things. So, a- a- and I really love her take on content
Thank
and
you.
stuff.
Yes, thank you so much, Leah, for joining us today. And it was really good to come back to this space. I haven't been in this space since November, and a lot has changed since now we're in February. So I'm really excited to see more what you're doing now since I know you, right? It's a little bit different. Like you can hear someone, you can see reels, you can see all these different things. And then when you actually have a conversation with them. So I'm so excited that we have this space to share and just look forward to working with you and trying to help veterans together because that's what it all is about is what we're all about at Mill to Vet, finding your tribe, right?
Right. And I do want to quickly say that on the back end, even though, I am indeed loud on social media, on the back end, I do advocate for you guys in the civilian space. So even if I challenge veteran perceptions, I do the same thing to civilians. So I challenge their misconceptions about veterans just as much as I challenge veteran misconceptions about civilians.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. All right, Mill Vet Tribe, thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out with us on Scuttlebutt. And to everybody that is not on camera that supports us, thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you guys do. That includes the people that are even on here sending comments and all that. So thank you so much.
What's going on with all the celebration background?
Oh, let's go. Does it work for me? Nope, it's not working for me. I think he's using his iPad.
Ah, I see.
Cheating.
Okay.
All right, with that, we are signing off.
Gotcha.
Remember, it's your transition. Take charge of it. Mill to Vet.